Hello and welcome to all of you, mothers and fathers, grandparents and elders, and all of you who have children that you care about in your lives. Welcome to this series of 4 online workshops, Parenting for a Peaceful World, Building a Connected Childhood in Times of Crisis. What do we mean by times of crisis? Well, we are collectively around the world living unquestionably in an unprecedented moment in history in which all of us, all of human civilization, all cultures, we are facing shared challenges that are quite urgent. For instance, climate change and all kinds of pollution and collapse of ecosystems. And with that comes a very, very strong, urgent imperative that somehow we need to shift the way that we do society, the way that we do our economies, the way that we do our production. Now, all of the solutions for these changes are already available. So what is it that will create the collective motivation and the capacity, the psychological capacity for all of us to move forward together into the kind of society that we need? And what does childhood have to do with that? Well, it turns out that the way that any society looks after the parents and the people that take care of children, and therefore the way that every society collectively raises its children, is probably the most powerful deciding factor determining how that society will behave. So that if we want a sustainable, harmonious, peaceful and just society that will last for generation after generation into the future and help us through this moment of great crisis and challenge, we need to raise our children accordingly so that they have the impulses for collaborativeness, harmony and sustainable development, sustainable relationships with nature and with each other as they grow up. They will treat the world as we treat them. Why is the title of this first talk, When Parents Were Children? What is so important about when we were children? Well, one of the things that I discovered and was able to confirm again and again through my 30 years of experience as a psychologist and psychotherapist and conducting my courses, my workshops as a parent educator, and all my research, is that the single most powerful influence on our style of parenting, the way in which we relate to each of our children, the single most powerful influence is the way that our parents and elders and school teachers related to us. The way we were treated strongly colors the way we relate to our children, the way we view and interpret our children. And that's despite, sometimes, in spite of all of the best information that we might be learning along the way with our reading and perhaps the parenting courses that so many of us are taking these days, now that so much great child development science is available. And this is what is so entirely normal for every parent around the world. There are times when, in spite of what we know that we want to give our children, we react instead of respond. And really, inside of reaction, there are 2 kinds of reaction. There's the underreaction or the overreaction. The difference between reaction and responding is that when we respond to our child, that comes from a place of choice, where we have the presence of mind. Even though we might feel tired or irritated or cranky or worried, and all of those emotions are there, but we still find a way to respond with choice. Whereas our reactions tend to be more uncontrolled. They're automatic, unconscious, and spontaneous. And this happens to every last one of us. Myself, you, everybody. All parent educators as well. We all have a kind of a growth pathway that we are on. And that when we're having a difficult day, we tend to overreact and underreact in automatic ways. Let's think about this. Let's think of some examples. Have you ever, when your baby, for instance, is reaching out for nurturance and holding, have you ever found yourself not really feeling like offering nurturance, but you might feel irritated, you might feel resentful, you might feel drained, exhausted, and sometimes you end up underreacting? Have you ever actually felt as a parent resentful for what you give to your child as attention, time, support, and that children being children, especially little children, they don't give back so much? Your giving doesn't get followed by gratitude or thank you or your child helping you. Not very much. Do you find yourself feeling angry and resentful, sometimes withholding, in spite of your best efforts, withholding your support? Have you ever found yourself being explosive emotionally to your child, scary, perhaps punishing or shaming, saying shaming things to your child, and that sometimes you regret that afterwards? You might feel pain about that in your heart or guilt, and you worry about your own quality as a parent afterwards. I want to assure you that this happens to parents everywhere around the world. And I meet parents from so many cultures and so many ethnic groups as I travel with my parenting workshops, both around Australia and New Zealand and around the world. Here's another example. Have you ever found yourself so frightened for your child's safety, and that inside you feel like your child is almost made of glass, and you're almost certain that there will be an injury when they're outside playing, for example, and that you find yourself overprotecting, holding your child back, overreacting again? See, there's underreaction and overreaction. And then with your overprotection, your child starts to find it difficult to develop their own strength and their own confidence. This affects many parents. It's normal. It's one of our very common challenges. Do you ever feel, here's another example, like you need to set a strong boundary of behavior with your child, to be assertive with your child, to say, no, I don't like you doing that, you need to stop, and yet you struggle to find the words, or that you might feel guilty if you say no? It's a troublesome emotion that comes up for many, many parents. So many of us feel guilty when we set a boundary afterwards, and we wonder why that is. Are you starting to see now that not just your knowledge is what influences your parenting? Because knowledge and information is like a map. You can have the world's best map, but in order to get to your destination, you still need really good quality fuel in the tank. Now, our emotional state, that is our fuel. And our emotional state inside varies up and down from day to day according to all kinds of things in our environment that affect us. And one of the greatest drivers of these emotional underreactions or overreactions that get in the way of seeing our children for who they are, that's how our own childhood affected us, our own childhood experiences. And now you see how important it is for all of us as parents just to understand a lot more. We can never fix our childhoods, but we don't need to. You just need to understand how our childhood affected us. I will show you some simple methods for doing that, so that we're less likely to pass on our own most painful childhood experiences to our children. We free our children from our own past as we free ourselves. So there is that difference between reaction and response. Why does that happen? Why do we get so triggered? Psychologists have often, for years, talked about this experience of the inner child, as if we all carry around inside of ourselves our own inner baby, inner toddler, inner child, inner adolescent, and that this child influences our responses and our reactions very much. But modern neuroscience has really helped us to understand that. What's been discovered is that there is a second kind of memory called body memory. And body memory is the experience of our bodies recalling the sensation or the emotion that we experienced much, much earlier in our lives. That could go back all the way to round about the third trimester in our mother's womb and our whole history in between. And that's an incredible thing to ponder, isn't it? There are triggers in our environment that bring up a little bit or sometimes a lot of these rushes of feeling, thinking, or bodily sensation that almost mysteriously spring from our own memory. And sometimes that can be a beautiful thing, by the way. There is an evolutionary purpose. We can be glad about this. Because, for instance, when you see your little baby lying there, tucked into their little blankets in their crib, and you can see the little hands and the little feet and the little wisps of hair, and you're touched by this image. And what rushes up in your heart is a very powerful commitment to protect and to hold and to give pleasure to this little baby that you're so moved by. Part of the reason why those strong feelings come up is that your baby is a trigger, and your body, do you remember body memory? Your body is recalling how you felt at the receiving end of your father's affections, your mother's affections. That is never lost to you. And the love that you've received give fuel to your body's capacity to pass on this love. So that's a wonderful aspect of body memory. Body memory is very different to what scientists call narrative memory, which is like the story memory, when you can recall events and you have a movie of these events in order inside your head. That's narrative memory. It's organized by a different part of the brain. So there's these two kinds of memory. I want to show some slides right now to summarize what I've been saying so far, and you'll begin to see why body memory is so important for us to understand in our journey as parents. So in slide number 1, when parents react instead of respond, it's because we have been triggered. And our children are very, very powerful, probably the most powerful triggers of our body memory from our own childhood. So when we are reacting not really to our child. We think we're reacting to our child, but we are actually reacting to our own childhood, to something from our own past. Instead of responding with a choice of response to our child and responding to the present moment, we're actually reacting to our own past, usually without realizing, at least at first. So our children's behavior has activated body memory. And in slide number 2, you'll see that there are two kinds of memory. And this is the result of leading edge neuroscience. First, there is narrative memory or story memory, and that's organized principally by a little piece of the brain called the hippocampus. That part of the brain is not mature until we're about 2, 3, or 4 years old. That's why we think that we can't remember anything from the time that we were babies. And in one way that's true, but in another way it's not true, in that our bodies can recall sensation and emotion from all of our life. Because what scientists call implicit memory, what psychotherapists have a different name of it, we call it body memory. That's organized by another part of the brain called the amygdala. and the amygdala reaches maturity when we are still inside our mother's womb at the 3rd trimester. And what happens when these emotions from our past come up very strongly is that it changes the way that we see our children, or generally people around us. Our vision gets coloured and distorted. What we're indeed doing in these moments is projecting. It's as if our minds are acting as a data projector. We're projecting elements of our own past onto our child. That leads us to judge our child's behaviour without looking at what's driving their behaviour. And it's too easy to do, just to frame our child in terms of their surface behaviour, which is often very vexing, bewildering, challenging, of course, difficult. Children are difficult people to live with, aren't they? But when we don't see through the behaviour into the emotional need that's driving it, that's because we've become judgmental. And it's not that we're bad for being judgmental. We all do that. Judgment just means that we've been triggered, emotion comes up from our past, and we start to project the past onto our child. So we start calling them names. Even in our own minds, we start blaming our children for the way that we feel, which is a recipe for the parenting relationship just not working. We cease to be effective with our children. We either frighten them into submission or we alienate them so that they don't listen to us anymore. That's the main reason why parents have great difficulty. It's about our own past. Sometimes it's us. We start to becoming hypercritical of ourselves. In our minds, we tell ourselves, I must be such a bad dad, I must be such a bad mum. Again, that's projection. That judgment signifies that we've been triggered and we're in the middle of experiencing something painful from our own histories. So I'm hoping that you're starting to see how important it is for all of us as parents to begin a journey of understanding how our childhoods have impacted us. Because once we do that, we get the freedom to respond, to choose. We get the freedom to heal ourselves and thereby not to pass on our history.